Yeah, we are in the place to be.
Thank you for tuning in to No Flag Radio. I'm your host, P. Putting you on to what's happening. Today we talking about the 14,000 migrants crossing into Mexico. First of all, let's talk numbers. America has about 303,916 illegal immigrants, as they say, that get apprehended at the border by the most recent figures. Now, this is just apprehended. There's probably way more that make it over. They just monitor the pattern of illegal immigration by how many apprehensions they have. So 14,000 people is just a piss in the bucket compared to who they've captured in previous years. These people here, they getting press and getting time to talk on a microphone. This is a different kind of immigrant. A different kind of illegal immigrant. I want y'all to see that, and we're gonna talk about that. But again, 14,000 ain't shit in terms of numbers. For example, here in Texas, we got Galveston. Galveston is the smallest city in Texas, has about 64,000 people. 14,000 people is less than a quarter of that, of what the smallest city is in Texas. 14,000 is not taxing on the geography or the people out here. Of course, we're gonna talk about black people and what this migrant issue may have to do with our employment out here. But trust me, this greedy ass Republican operated Texas is going to find a place for these people, period, under the radar, and they're gonna keep it moving. They're gonna put them in DACA camps or something like DACA camps. And we always said those DACA camps were a test ground for something. Well, here you have it. This is just my conjecture. They're gonna put them in DACA camps. You're gonna make sure they cool, they're gonna make sure they healthy, make sure they ain't got no AIDS, no syphilis, no herpes, no shit like that. And they gonna let them loose on the first low-paying job that comes up to the DACA camp asking for them. The first contractor that needs those people specifically and asks for them to come over, that paid somebody to get them over here, whichever one of those employers raise their hand up and say, okay, you got them, they over there, good, I'm finna come get them. One of these big corporations, I'm sure. The first subsidized housing opening they see and that they find available, they gonna make them nice and cozy there. Y'all see what this is? And Trump is cool with this. Your president, everybody, they cool with it. Now, if you watch the press conference of the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he looks so much like he's just faking it up for the camera. So damn phony. Like somebody just told him, Pompeo, go ahead and calm down the white people. Go ahead and talk to the white people. Let them know, hey, we're on it. We're on it, white people. We've got you covered, buddy. It's a damn joke. I'll put the link in the description. But he's sitting up talking about this migrant caravan will not cross our borders and all this crap, right? It looks so fake, but let's look into my narrative of why I think America is in on this shit and why they would do this. First of all, we all say warfare is about deception. And the deception here is that the white supremacist terrorist regime we're dealing with currently won't pull some PR stunt like this, making it look like they're intolerant of this kind of migration. All to collect some white supremacist terrorist money. This is about white supremacist terrorist corporations getting paid, alright? Mike Pompeo talking that you will not cross our southern border illegally and you may be a victim of human trafficking if you come over and all this crap. All this crap they've been spewing for about the past year. When they try to fix a narrative into the minds of would-be migrants, right? But this shit is about greed. White supremacist terrorism as a body, and it has greedy ass bones as a part of his body. You know, one thing that I've been kind of thinking about over the past few months is that there's evidence and a potential within this society for the white supremacist terrorist powers that be to socially engineer and make efforts to condition this whole system we're in into a white supremacist terrorist dictatorship. And with a dictatorship, you have to first condition people to have a lowered guard for shit like this. Big media extravaganza type psyops type shit that you can, at a snap of your fingers, get people to be supportive of a one-sided narrative on the shit. A narrative of bring out the troops, where the civilians will be baying for and commanding military activity and military presence, military posture, or so they think, when it's just only going to be in line with what this one-sided government has to say, right? Covertly, in my opinion, this is priming the public for being in line with a solitary view or a solitary perspective's control, like Trump and Mike Pompeo and all the deplorables. At a moment's notice, when the right event condition pops off, there's already a hatred towards migrants and immigrants. So just think about it. This looks like the interworkings of dictatorship type shit that they're doing here. So let's look a little bit more into it. First of all, in my dictatorship video, I talked about the G7 summit and the possibility of Trump breaking all the US's former allies, its alliance with NATO. Hasn't broken it off with NATO yet. He was just basically filibustering on how the US is funding NATO, which is not true, but okay. This was this summer, and he was supposed to be going to this G7 summit, making an indictment basically of all America's long-term friends, quote-unquote friends. And I explained, y'all know I don't put any stock in those titles of these are America's friends and these over here are America's enemies, so forth and so on. And know that the G7, it meets strictly for political and social issues, not money issues. So women's rights, everybody just be nice to each other if you're part of the G7, shit like that, right? So we're gonna pull the calendar a little bit back before Trump went to the G7 summit. 6 months ago in April, Mexico was giving out what they call transit visas to caravans, just like these 14,000 we're talking about from Central America. A transit visa is just what it sounds like. It's a visa for someone in transit, a transitory person, a transitory group making a passage from one place through another place. So Mexico was looking at these Central Americans and allowing them visas to pass through, not to stay, but pass through Mexico to get to where? America, right? They explicitly state this is their reasoning for trekking through, because they put the camera in a lot of their faces back then during the news report, the few that they did on this, the few reports that they put out. But they amazingly show up with these news cameras interviewing these quote-unquote illegals, right? So all these news stations, they all down with the same arm of white supremacist terrorism. You think about it. All these media outlets. It's kind of like how with the 3%ers, how they're able to get these interviews, these militias, these anti-government groups are able to be interviewed by local news and are getting humanized, and they get the cameras to go through their house and look at the pictures of grandma on the wall, right? Getting humanized in the media. This is the type of shit that's going on. There was a reason behind that with the 3%ers, and it's a reason behind this with these fake migrants, these fake illegal immigrants. But back to it, they explicitly state their reasonings for trailing through Mexico was to get to America. Just like these 14,000 or so we're seeing now. So in the video that I'm putting in the description, just know that Mike Pompeo is lying when he says that he thinks this is something that should be taken seriously. He's lying. They've already been in on letting this shit ride before. Alright? And how they even put a number of 14,000 on it also shows me America is in on this shit. America requested this amount of people, in my opinion. America was letting people in before the G7 summit. They got started bright and early in the damn year. And there's no talk of them getting turned around. They had about 1,000 people in that caravan about 6 months ago. There's no talk of them people getting turned around. It was a test to see if people could actually make it through and walk or whatever. Never mind all that talk about El Salvador being a shithole country. Let's just talk about some of the countries that are involved in this migration with the 14,000 people. Honduras, El Salvador. I want to talk about those two in particular. Y'all remember Trump was talking all this shit about El Salvador being a shithole country. El Salvador is one of these places that these migrants are coming from. We're going to look at El Salvador in detail in a bit, but y'all remember early in the year, after Trump's immigration summit, he was talking all that Haiti is a shithole country, Nigeria, some other African countries were shithole countries. He also fixed his mouth to say El Salvador. So El Salvador is a bad place, right? Why would America allow such a bad place, El Salvador, Honduras, what I'm speaking on, who have high homicide rate, high poverty rate, all this shit. Why would America allow such bad places to come through Mexico to get to their destination here in America? Better yet, why would Mexico not sick their own military dogs and shit on these migrants? And why would Mexico call America for backup to help calm that shit down? Why? Because America got that work for them when they come here to their destination in America. Period. America's willing to give them all the jobs they looking for. Because America loves cheap labor at whatever damn cost. America is prepared to handle what they bring in. So don't be fooled, people. So we talked about the visas that Mexico was giving, these transit visas to these caravans months ago, but just in smaller number. So you may ask yourself, why would Mexico allow these transit visas for people to walk through their shit? Now let's talk about the G20 in terms of a body of countries showing their allegiance to the economic whims of a white supremacist terrorist dictatorship type climate slowly starting to build up in America. The G20 consists of countries that make up 85% of the world's global output. That's 85% of the world's wealth. And it contains the United States, the whole European Union, Argentina, Brazil, and a place by the name of Mexico, right? Now the G20 is about real money partners, not about the bullshit that the G7 is about. That's just about political, social shit, and those are just talking points that they bring up. They don't enforce anything that comes out of the G7. So when you hear G7, just know they're not trying to enforce shit, right? But understand, with the G20, these groups are put together for the purpose of money. So if Mexico is one of America's money partners, and you're allowing a group to storm your money partner's borders, as they're framing it in the white supremacist terrorist media over here, that brings suspicion to me. That seems real shady to me. This is 14,000 cheap laborers, period. Now, a little bit about the history of these places. The ones that I want to talk about are Honduras and El Salvador. First of all, Honduras, right now it has a high crime rate, so it's hard to maintain business interests over there, right? But Oliver North himself, the only real cocaine kingpin of the 1980s in America, with his punk ass, wrote about the Honduran DC-6. That's Honduran, dog, cat, and then the number 6. Being used for drug runs into New Orleans, Louisiana, under the Contra shit that y'all remember. If you grew up in the crack era, you know what I'm talking about. This is all gonna come together. Y'all stay with me. El Salvador, for those of you who lived through the crack era like me, you remember Reagan and Oliver North. They orchestrated putting billions into El Salvador under that fake ass lie about, hey, let's protect El Salvador. Let's make El Salvador a post for keeping communists and communism out of the Western Hemisphere. And we see now that it was all about protecting the cocoa farms they got out there to get coke in the black communities in the US and start that drug trade and start the predatory imprisonment out here. We know that. Now, our current President Donald Trump always makes a point to say, who was one of his political idols? Ronald Reagan. All right, this whole thing with these migrants, trust me, it's about him revisiting what his idol touched on and capitalizing on some of the fuckery his idol helped exasperate in those countries and that he dealt in. And just like Reagan was about money, Trump is about money. Alright, so to my discussion of the whims of white supremacist terrorist dictatorship and just the psychology of running a white supremacist terrorist dictatorship as the next gratuitous step after a white supremacist terrorist regime that we live in now. This is all a ritual and a way to ritualize the attitude of, hey, let's give 3 cheers for our dictator, or a dictator type personality in power. Just keep watching how they insert little social happenstances into the daily conversation of America that soften you up to say, hey, the dirtballs in power, they're not all bad. Look at what they do, or rather what they say about migrants and immigrants coming in. And that Mike Pompeo video, it was all lip service. You'll notice that. All, we're not gonna tolerate it type bullshit, but no action plan, no date to implementing the first step of an action plan to counter these migrants, right? That should be glaring example number 1 of the bullshit they really pulling. This is all temperature taking on behalf of the president and those who fuck with him. They're checking people's psyches and saying, hey, let's make up a situation where we can big up our white supremacist terrorist dictator one time, where the people will big him up one time. We in October, it's a lot of Republican states is having elections for white supremacist terrorist DAs like Faith Johnson out here. Mayors like old dude in Chicago that Trump is actually bigging up. Gary McCarthy, the guy who has a vendetta against Chicago. And I say specifically a vendetta against black people in Chicago. Because remember, he got fired off the Laquan McDonald case for trying to run that cover-up shit. And he got asked to step down. So he's still mad about that shit. And Trump is endorsing him for mayor of Chicago. Even though he's a Democrat and Trump is a Republican. We already know white supremacy has no party. If it's about treating black people bad, they all down. They all down with it. And I talked about that in my Chicago video about the 66 people shot, quote unquote, in that one weekend. Right now they on some let's give 3 cheers right now for America. Everybody do it. Everybody be more patriotic and show more resolve than ever. America, America. White supremacist terrorist regime that it is. Right? And most importantly, let's give 3 cheers for Donald Trump and his party. They will forever be known as the party who stood up to the Mexicans and the Hondurans and the El Salvadorans and whoever the fuck else. It's so you put your guard down to the more detrimental and more devious workings of this infrastructure. That's all this is. But black people, if you're on my channel, you know we staying wise to all of it. Now, to the dominant society with your workaday white supremacist terrorists out there, it's just like the Cosby thing about them smoke screening other dirt their group of beings is pulling off in the process of all of this, never questioning anything the political arm of white supremacist terrorism is doing, especially when they can frame it as something proactively good that they're doing and keeping out invaders, as they say. And I've seen it all on social media today, calling these migrants invaders. Like white supremacist terrorist society as America is the one to talk about invaders and feeling encroached upon. No, dummy, these are people your white supremacist terrorist higher ups, higher than your workaday ass, asked to come over. You saw how happy they was looking in the pictures? Happy as hell. All the babies look calm, they look well taken care of. It didn't look like there was a shitty diaper in the crowd. Boy, motherfuckers was happy, laughing, giggling. It was a fun. It looked fun. You know what I'm saying? Y'all notice that a portion of them were on big military trucks, which they don't show much of, but this is a migration well funded by white supremacist terrorist society here, and the dirtballs in power want you to, from time to time, be soft on them and have a heart for their presence and whatever. So they got a lot of workaday white supremacist terrorist food But the black people on my channel, we ain't playing. And let's just get to it. We already see this shit as a primer for disenfranchising black workers in Texas. First off, let's just say that first. While in the process of fomenting goodwill and good words for evil white supremacist terrorist males in power, state by state. Because now Republicans, they're going to get a boost in their campaigns nationally just by stating something about the migrants coming over in Texas. You know what I mean? And how it's bad. You see? That cools down the fire this country may have against the party of people that everybody is saying is the white supremacist terrorist party that we see now. They call them Republicans. But of course, we know all political parties told the white supremacist terrorist line. That's obvious. We already know. These migrants coming over is a pageantry orchestrated by power, by the chief hand of power in the United States, point blank. George Orwell says power is not a means, it's an end. So it's not a means meant to lubricate something else to happening. It's an end in itself. And white supremacist terrorism is a power system. They have power and they're out to flex it to the detriment of who they choose and to the benefit of who they choose. And yo, in the same quote, he says, one does not establish a dictatorship to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution to establish the dictatorship. So, going back to my video where I talked about all these books that white supremacist terrorist society came out with, talking about all the L's that white society is taking and all the L's that white masculinity is taking during the Obama years. All these books about white men losing in white supremacist terrorist American society written by white males. I mentioned this in my video. I think it was the ethno-state that Docility made, or either the Richard Spencer video, one of them I think. But all these books like Angry White Men, The Looming Tower, all of that was intellectualizing and breeding up white supremacist terrorist revolutionary thought and the fake ass philosophy that white males are somehow victims of other people that are not white males. All through the term of Obama's White House. These were best-selling damn books. So out of that revolutionary thought, if you could call it revolutionary meaning some sort of drastic change, and there hasn't been any drastic change in power in America since it started. But out of that, what do we see today? Barbecue Becky, John Coward-ass Cowell, who killed our little sister Nia Wilson, Amber Geiger, who killed Botham Jean. They were carrying out the social rituals that accompanied the white supremacist terrorist revolutionary thought. So we're talking about rituals, we're talking about hooray, hooray for the Secretary of State saying that these migrants are bad type shit. You understand? The undercurrent of this migration of these workers, I'm gonna call them workers, I ain't gonna play. I mean, it's about white supremacist terrorist society making the charge towards a public soft enough ideologically for the public to be puppetable ideologically and soft enough to have a dictator, to have a motherfucker in place that's so fondly thought of that he cannot be perceived to do anything wrong. I think I said that in my dictatorship video as well. So watch Trump's call and response he has with his white supremacist terrorist base over this issue over the next few months. They're right for being ran by a motherfucker, right for being ran by this administration, never questioning anything he does. After some shit like this happens and he quote unquote handles it, he's gonna handle this in a very obscure way. I don't even think we're gonna even see how he handles it. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't see what they did with the 1,000 migrants that got those same transit visas to walk through Mexico 6 months ago. We didn't see nothing. So, I mean, they didn't publicize anything. So I don't think we're gonna see anything in this case. They may show a few of these migrants in DACA-like camps once they get up to the border, you know, for some photo ops and shit. They might show some of the Texas military coming out, standing around the border. But these people, trust me, will disappear and assimilate well into the workforce out here in Texas. And that's just the end of it. This is a damn ploy. So don't take this issue as anything other than that. A damn ploy. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, so you know when I'm dropping. Get it, y'all.